let's get to the 16th Semiosis 101 episode on general Peircean semiotic theory for illustrators and designers. Now this week, in around 10 minutes, we will mix things up a lot by looking at how we visually communicate to an audience through the things that they know, to the things themselves. What we are addressing here is the state of mind, the experiences, the qualities of things that our audiences know that we can connect with through the visual language we choose. How do we do this? Well, with semiosis and the quality of feeling. Peirce calls this quality of feeling fierceness. A strange term, fierceness. Peirce describes fierceness as that which is as it is independently of anything else. Exactly. So in this week's video, we will wrestle with Peirce's problematic terminology to put his important philosophical thinking behind the state of fierceness into something that helps illustrators and designers to understand their audiences better. You don't believe me? Well, let's jump straight into the video to see how fierceness is crucial in understanding how to semiotically connect with our audiences we visually communicate to. So, subscribe, hit the bell. Fierceness, here we come.
Hi, welcome to this week's talk. Last week, just before Christmas it was, we covered To the Things Themselves, which started to discuss Peirce's phenomenological states in which our audience interprets any of the semiotic science that we create and interprets our designs and illustrations. So in that video, we covered his three phenomenological states: firstness, secondness, and thirdness. And yes, he does call them that. Now, firstness is a state that is existent. So this all relates to us humans as being in the world. We're human beings, we exist. So the first state is about spontaneity. It's about existence and being in that moment of unrelated things, but existing within that realm. Secondness, you move up a level to being the things that we experience are relative to other things that we've experienced. And level 3, thirdness, is mediated by the things that we have. So we covered that in the first talk, so check that one out. But what we also have here is we're going to reuse C.S. Peirce Speaks tweets, where this Twitter account basically pulls out quotes from Peirce and tweets from Beyond the Grave. And Peirce says, in the ideas of firstness, secondness, and thirdness, the three elements or universal categories appear under the forms of firstness. What he means by that is we need to start from somewhere, and as humans, we are existing in the world. We are being in the world. And just by being, we take in a lot of things that are necessarily unrelated at first until we start making meanings between them. And that is sort of where we start from with a sense of firstness. So I'm just going to delve over the next 3 weeks into firstness, secondness, and thirdness. But this week, we're going to go straight into firstness and how that relates from a graphic design illustration point of view to our target audience. And so that we can hook them in by being a bit more mindful of these things. Okay, so if you were to ask your target audience, what do they know about this? They won't have any idea. So there's no point in trying to approach it from that perspective. But like anything, this is a state of being. It is not quantifiable. It is qualitative. So Peirce, when he starts talking about fierceness, he says here, the first is that whose being is simply in itself, not referring to anything nor lying behind anything. So let's move on. He says, the first is that they act in one determinate direction and tend asymptomatically towards bringing about an ultimate state of things. So we need to unpack what he's really saying here, because like you're finding out through the Semiosis 101 YouTube channel, Peirce says a lot, and he has a great amount of ideas that are applicable, but it does need some designer-centric language to bring it back into something that designers and illustrators can understand. So let me just try and help you towards that solution. Okay? So you're probably asking as many questions of what he's trying to say here as your target audience would be. Okay, so let's just break this down a bit more. Okay, let's just pull out some words from his quotes. Obviously, in this talk, we're talking about firstness. So he starts talking about first. We are talking about a sense of being here. And it's at the simplest level of being. So, just think about, you individually, never mind being a designer or an illustrator or an audience or whatever, just think about being human. You exist. You are a being in the world. You simply exist no matter what is thrown at you on a day-to-day basis. You exist. So in the state of firstness, the things that we encounter are not necessarily there to refer to other things. They are there as stimuli to ourselves. He talks about firstness being in one determinate direction. So if you think about if you are made aware of something, okay, and this is where we start tying it into graphic design and illustration. If you're aware of something, there was a moment when you weren't aware. Then there's a moment when you are aware, and that changes you because you're now aware. And that is one determinate direction. A state of not being aware to a state of being aware. And we can argue that any piece of visual communication design, graphic design, illustration, there is a point where until our audience starts truly engaging with our work, other than just passing it by, that there was a moment before they became aware of your work, intrigued by your work, brought into your work, hooked into your work, aesthetically brought in, then your designs can then start to work on your target audience. And that is one determinate direction from not being aware of your design to now being aware that this design, this illustration is trying to communicate something to them. And this is where the state of firstness happens. It is the ultimate state of things. So if you think about, or as a human being, we're surrounded by stimuli that are things, real things, ideas, senses, all these different things. And it's not until we have that moment of being aware of something that we start to try and make sense in our world, in our state of being, that this must mean something to me. And it's within that broad phenomenological state of firstness that we start to work semiotically, making connections to things that have been there in plain sight, but until somebody joins them together, being aware of it, they'll just pass it by. Okay, so let's just move one step forward and try and summarize what we've just covered there. Okay, so our audiences, target audience, fellow human beings, we're trying to communicate to through the brief that we've been given by our clients, are like the designer and like the illustrator, are in a state of being. We exist in the world, we have experiences, we have lived experiences, we have stimuli that we respond to, stimuli we don't respond to. So from the point of view of Peirce's theory, the sense of firstness doesn't refer to anything. It just exists as that first state, and simply put, it's the state of not being aware to then being aware. And once you're aware, then you start seeking meaning. Okay? So that's where that is one determinate direction of your work and an ultimate state of things, that all the stimuli that our target audience would respond to on a day-to-day basis is there up for grabs for designers and illustrators to tap into, to hook the target audience in. Okay? So let's just now pull this together and connect it to something that we've already covered in previous videos, which is iconic representation. So iconic representation, which we've covered in previous videos, and this is a quote from Tony Jappi in his excellent book. I've made it into designer-centric terms, so the designer-centric term replaces the word object, which is Peirce's term for concept, something that illustrators and designers will understand. So I'll read it with the designer-centric terms put in place. Iconic representation can only relate to a concept by qualities as it resembles a concept through the association of shared qualities, whether that concept exists or not. So, iconic level of representation operates in a state of firstness. There's resemblances to, and it's only when you become aware of seeing something, and we used an example in the previous video of red, when you start to associate red with something, then you are starting the semiotic journey off. And that happens in the state of firstness. We are in the state of firstness anyway, but it's only when you start to make connections to things that you know exist, that you become aware of something that's trying to tell you something using connotative visual language, that your visual communicating to your target audience moves to a level where the semiotic sign, the iconic sign, starts to work as a semiotic sign. So we covered that in previous videos from an iconic point of view. This video, so like bookends those videos by talking about it from the philosophical state of the phenomenological state of the fact that we exist in the world, and our first state is firstness, within which there's a moment when you're not aware to a moment when you are aware. When you are aware, then it's a determinate direction that takes you in. And that's what you do as a designer when you start to pull in essentially semiotic signs to help strengthen the message you want to get across connotatively. Okay? So let's just end today on a take-home. So a little bit of homework for you. So this week's bite-sized piece of applicable semiotic knowledge is that remember that a semiotic sign only begins to work when perceived as a sign for something. So that perception, as soon as you perceive something, you're going from being not aware to aware, and you perceive it as something other than it would be to somebody else who may just walk by. So it is within the state of firstness that our audience begin to spot iconic resemblances to things they already know. So, as designers and illustrators, at the basic level of sketching possible ideas to answer the brief, what things, as examples, colours, shapes, marks, etc., can you explore to help you to hook your target audience in that are resemblances to things that they are familiar with? Now, this thought exercise you're doing, this thought exercise is your starting point of engaging with this state of firstness, this phenomenological state of firstness. Now, you don't have to go any further than that, but it is that case of you are aware now. You weren't aware before, you're now aware now that this is a phenomenological state, a philosophical state in which humans start to make sense. And this is applicable into all kinds of other theories, Gestalt theory and that. There's a moment when you didn't think it, and there's a moment when you do think it. And as designers and illustrators, you can make people transition from one to the other. And that's through getting them into a state of firstness. Okay, so that's it for this week. Come back next week and we'll have more, but that's it.
So that is our 10 minutes of Pearson Semiosis 101 for this week. Quality of feeling, qualities, resemblances, feelings. None of these words present designers and illustrators with a tangible thing. These words and states of being are amorphous, and as such offer visual communication designers a variety of initial options to capture the audience's attention by hooking them in with visible cues that are familiar to them. In the very first Semiosis 101 video, I discussed the elephant in the design studio, tacit knowledge. Knowledge we cannot tell because we can't put it into words. Do you remember? If not, go back and watch that video next. Okay, as creatives, designers and illustrators create complex visuals out of lines, circles, shapes, colours, textures, etc. Semiotically, these only begin to work as semiotic signs to connote bigger and deeper concepts through the visual communication once our target audience perceive these elements as something. So it is in the first phenomenological level of firstness that a semiotic sign action begins to communicate something more than a line, circle, shape, colour, texture, etc. Within a state of firstness, our target audience makes a subconscious connection to something they have experienced before, a familiar quality, resemblance or feeling invoked in the visual they are looking at. Our audience begins to read our visual communication as more than its aesthetic. Now these aesthetics we design or illustrate are there to grab attention. The embedded semiotic signs we craft aesthetically are semiotic hooks to get the audience engaging cerebrally with reading the message we need to visually communicate. And we call this the tone or tone of voice, but let's call it sign action, semiosis. Firstness is the state in which our success as designers and illustrators to visually communicate begins. Now next week we move on to secondness, but what that phenomenological state contributes to making our designs or illustrations work successfully. Come back next week and find out. Hit the subscribe button and the bell to be first for secondness. Hi, if you've watched these videos before, you probably know by now I'm Dave Wood, a design educator and researcher, a published design author, and I've worked commercially as both a freelance illustrator and graphic designer. The guy behind the theory, Charles Sanders Peirce, was a philosopher, a mathematician, and a theorist, but he wasn't a creative. Each week on this Scout Scott Semiosis 101 YouTube channel, I'll post at least one 10-minute explainer video on an aspect of Peirce's pragmatic semiotic theory. Each free Semiosis 101 10-minute video will use designer-centric terms instead of theoretical language so that illustrators and graphic designers can understand and follow. Each video will feature a take-home piece of applicable semiotic theory, and they do interconnect to build up your understanding of semiosis. But this channel is not a course in semiotics per se. Instead, each video is a bite-sized illustrated piece of new knowledge on sign action, or semiosis as Peirce names it. The aim of these free videos is to take Peirce's quite complex philosophical theoretical language and put it in the context of designing visual communication, whether these are illustrations, motion, branding, packaging, editorial, etc. By subscribing to this Scout Scott Semiosis 101 YouTube channel, you will learn how Peirce's pragmatic semiotic theory of semiosis can help to enhance and improve how you visually communicate. I have many more Peircean semiotic topics to discuss, but I'd be interested in hearing about your semiotic ideas. Add a comment below. If you like this video, check out my other semiotic videos and consider liking and sharing those videos with others. The more we creatives discuss semiotic theory, the easier its application into our creative processes will be. As a fellow creative and a published design author, I have a link in the description to my Scout Scott website where you can find all the Semiosis 101 videos and read background info on the blog. You can download free Semiosis 101 video transcripts and reading lists. You can buy illustrated and typographical gift ranges on my Redbubble shop. You can also buy my 2014 design book published by Bloomsbury Publishing, Interface Design and Introduction to Visual Communication in UI Design. Over the years, I have collaborated with other design academic researchers and Pearson semioticians to develop a designer-centric explanation of Pearson's theoretical language. If you are interested in reading my semiotic Rosetta Stone academic writing, then you can visit my academia.edu link in the description. Any other books on Pearson semiotics or design I've mentioned in the videos are also listed in the description. Check them out too. Thanks for watching. Check out the other videos, like and share them with your friends, and hit the bell and subscribe buttons to be notified when next week's video is published. You can also follow Semiosis 101 on the socials for updates. It's Scout_Scott on Instagram and Semiosis 101 on Twitter. See you all again next week for more Semiosis 101 to help illustrators and designers to enhance your visual communication skills.